The Bush DAC90a or DAC90a was a very popular radio in the UK in its day for broadcast reception in the home. Now a vintage radio, there are plenty of them available at collectors' markets and on the internet. As they are relatively compact, they make an ideal genuine vintage radio for many homes or for starting a vintage radio collection. The DAC90a was introduced in February 1950 and followed on from its predecessor, the DAC90. The 90A, though, was a better radio using more modern valves and a generally improved circuit. Many thousands were produced as they were relatively low cost, costing £12 1 shilling and 8 for the walnut version and £12 16 shillings and 9 for the cream version. Both of these prices, though, had purchase tax added on top. Even though the radio was comparatively low cost, it was still expensive when compared to the average weekly wage for the time. The DAC90a was a 5-valve superhet radio. 4 valves were used for the radio sections and 1 was for the power supply rectifier. The set could operate from either AC or DC and used a dropper resistor rather than a transformer to provide the different voltages where they were required. This meant that the chassis was wired directly to the mains, so when it's plugged in, beware that you don't touch the chassis or any metal parts, otherwise you could get a very nasty shock. The circuit was a straightforward lineup and it used valves with 100 mA heaters, so they could be wired in series. The first valve was a triode hexode and it provided the RF, mixer and local oscillator functions. The second was a pentode used for the IF amplifier. The third was a double diode triode which provided the diode detection and the first audio stage amplification. The final valve in the lineup for the radio itself was an output pentode, which was used for the final audio output to the loudspeaker. The power supply rectifier was only a half-wave rectifier, although the high voltage or high tension smoothing used 2 capacitors and a resistor in a pi configuration to provide adequate removal of the ripple. The radio had its own internal loudspeaker and even its own internal coil antenna, which was located on one side of the radio. This meant that it might need orientating to provide the best reception for a particular signal, but no external antenna was needed. Many radios of the time needed a reasonable antenna to be connected so that they could pick up the signals, and many people had wire antennas in their back gardens for this purpose. The radio was very easy to use. It simply needed to be turned on using the on-off and volume control on the left-hand side of the panel. Tuning for the set was provided by the control on the right-hand side of the front panel, and the band change control was on the side. The dial lighting was rather dim. This was the case on all of these radios, but it could be seen when the lighting was low. Being a valve radio, it took a while to warm up before the sound came through. I suppose this could be considered to be the modern equivalent of computers booting up. When looking to buy one of these radios, it's worth making a few checks. The main thing is to check that the Bakelite case has no cracks because it's not easy to repair them without leaving a visible line. Small chips and scratches can sometimes be polished out, but cracks really are an issue. Also, check that the back cover is there. This is essential for safety. It's also worth having a good look at the tuning dial plate where the frequencies and stations are marked out. With age, and especially if they're kept in damp conditions, the paint can come off this like it has on this radio. If you can physically see the radio before buying, check that all the components are there. Make sure that they're the right ones, and don't get caught out by people just putting any old valves in the slots, as sometimes happens. Finally, remember that the capacitors deteriorate with age. This is especially true for the electrolytic capacitors, so be prepared to replace them if necessary. The DAC90a is a beautiful little radio, and its styling is so typical of the time, and as a result of its size it can fit into most modern rooms. It's ideal as a genuine vintage radio or retro item for the home. For more information, check the description, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Thank you.